Greetings from AHA Process. We welcome you to this webinar that's going to talk about workplace stability and getting ahead in the workplace, how to better work with the businesses in your community on retention and productivity with entry-level or wage employees. We have Ermina Solar with us today. Ermina has been a client of AHA Process for many, many years. And welcome, Ermina, and it's all yours.
Thank you. Good morning. So my name is Ermina, and I will share pieces of my own personal journey and experiences with daily instability today. Some of the challenges that I encountered in maintaining stability and how I learned to stay motivated when pushing through barriers. I will use personal storytelling as I go through the slides. These slides are designed for the workplace stability training, but I will also explain how I came to learn about these constructs during my own experience as a Getting Ahead investigator 10 years ago. Much of our focus today will be on the individual lens and experience, but I just want to point out that the issues of instability are also community related and institutional. And that all three of those contribute and cause poverty. So I was born into generational poverty and grew up in subsidized housing, or as we called it, the projects in Brooklyn, New York. By the time I was 21, I had experimented with drugs and alcohol, dropped out of high school, had 2 children, and fled from an abusive relationship to raise my kids on the island of Puerto Rico. I had a couple random jobs as a teenager, but it wasn't until I experienced welfare reform in my mid-20s that I would begin to experience some of the negative implications of the workforce and systemic structures such as the cliff effect. And I'll come back to that story and definition in a bit. I moved to Iowa about 12 years ago looking for a better quality of life, and I was about to give birth to my 3rd child and begin my plight into the middle class, or more commonly experienced in today's economy as the working class. Over the past 10 years, I've facilitated Getting Ahead classes. I've coached individuals with their own plans towards self-sufficiency. I've trained thousands of community members using the Bridges constructs, and I was employed by the city of Dubuque to run a community engagement model in which we applied and used the Bridges framework. So this is a mental model representing that there are a combination of factors that equal or contribute to stability. And if you are familiar with the work of AHA Process, then you know that we use a lot of mental models to be able to transfer information. They can be pictures, stories, or analogies that help us retain and learn concepts. A person's environment and the resources they have determine the level of stability that they're experiencing in their lives. And as it turns out, the level of stability you experience to a large degree determines how you operate in life and even the language you speak. My environment prepared me to think quickly and act on my toes with a focus on only the present moment. I followed social norms and cues that were designed for survival with very little thought about my future or even the possibility of having long-term stability. My communication style was direct, casual, and a bit too colorful, as Ebonics was my language of choice. And this was the case for both English and Spanish, and it was fine and acceptable at home or on the streets, but not so great at work. And so I had to adjust, adapt, and in many ways assimilate to a new set of expectations in order to survive in the workforce. My first real job was at a local health center in Puerto Rico. I was originally placed there to complete compliance hours for welfare reform. I remember being described as a fast learner and a team player, and I was hired on staff within 4 months. I was off of welfare, and I was working a variety of different positions at the health center for the next 4 years. Yet, I did not feel like I was any better off than when I had started or when I was receiving subsidies and assistance. This is a mental model of some of the factors consuming the mind, time, and energy of an individual experiencing daily instability. The first time I was introduced to this concept was as an activity facilitated for a group of 12 other Getting Ahead participants. We each had the opportunity to fill in a blank circle with all of the things that consumed our present moment. To this day, this activity helps me to take a step back from the chaos or emotion of my current experience, and it allows me to be critical and proactive about problem solving some of the things that I do have control over. Barriers are always going to be present, and sometimes those obstacles make it difficult to manage work and life balance, to show up and to be fully engaged or productive, and sometimes even to justify prioritizing employment over whatever else may be taking up space at the moment, especially if that employment is compromising relationships. For example, as a single mother, I have almost always struggled with childcare, having to call out of work due to a sick child, bringing the kids to my job after school and having them wait in the clinic's waiting room until I got off, or even leaving them home alone at times so that I wouldn't have to miss work and call out again. An ongoing instability of childcare could cause an employee to quit even if they like their job. The value of the relationships is often far greater than the value of financial stability. This is because when you live in instability, many of your problems are solved through the relationships that you have. When you live in a stable environment, the circle looks a bit different. And as you can see, the centerpiece or driving force is achievement, making financial stability the value that motivates other factors. This is not to say that relationships aren't valued any less or they're any less important. But when experiencing stability, the factors in your circle can often be solved by some kind of monetary exchange. Also, if you are having difficulty in one area or another, it usually doesn't cause the whole circle to come tumbling down. Think of transportation. If your car breaks down, what do? Might you have a second vehicle in your household? Do you have auto insurance that covers the cost of a rental car or an extended warranty that could cover repairs? Can you pay for a cab to get to work? Or do you have to miss a day or two to stabilize the unexpected transportation issue? Also, I think it's important to add that the way in which individuals experience some of the common factors in the circle can be quite different. In stability, we interact with mortgages and property value when it comes to housing. In instability, housing focus is on affordable rent, safety, and convenience. Like, is this unit near a bus line or close to daycare centers or supermarkets? Jobs become careers, and applying for them with an emphasis on, does this position meet my needs and match my skill sets? We compete for promotions that will contribute to our financial stability goals. But in instability, a job is often viewed as just a means to an end. Take a minute and think about how you interact with and problem solve some of the factors in your life. Daily instability is the extent to which an individual does without resources. This was one of the most liberating concepts I learned while going through Getting Ahead. Reports state that 40% of Americans are only one missed paycheck away from poverty, and this number increases to 57% for households of color. I had long ago come to the conclusion that I will probably always struggle with trying to be financially secure. If the reality of living life is always being broke, then there isn't a whole lot of motivation and persistence to fuel ambition. However, by redefining stability and adding multiple resources needed to live a healthy and quality lifestyle, then that gives individuals a chance to add value to the areas of their lives that contribute to a holistic approach towards stability. I began to view my situation differently and looked for ways to increase some of the resources I did have and stop focusing as much energy on my place within the federal poverty guideline, which, by the way, is slightly under $26,000 for a family of 4. Making the goal of financial security would mean that I would have to earn $52,000 a year. These resources are often passed down from parents, family, friends, and connections. The community is also responsible for growing the resources within the community. The resources of the employee base plays directly into the stability of a business, and the resources of a business link directly to the stability of the employees. The work of AHA process introduced me to the concept of 11 different resources needed to balance a sustainable quality of life. But one of these categories require little to no money at all to increase. The only one that focuses on the financial basis is the financial resource. All other resources can be built and contributed to and added value without spending money. So taking a self-assessment and identifying strengths and weaknesses under each resource allowed me to begin a process of critical thinking and problem solving in order to increase my stability. I learned that my ability to communicate and code switch between casual and formal dialogues would help me become more relatable when serving clients, maximizing the value of customer service for the business. I learned that my charismatic personality would help me become a team player and even enhance my storytelling structure to be able to captivate an audience as a presenter. I learned that language as my strongest resource could help me increase my financial resources by means of employment opportunities, and it would increase my social resources by increasing my networks. Using my strengths to supplement my weaknesses and learning how to transfer those skills into the workplace setting became my new formula for stability. Unfortunately, instability or poverty isn't just about individual choice or even an absence of resources available to solve problems. There are also many systemic implications that contribute to instability. Each of the areas is valid and a part of the cause of poverty. All of these issues contribute, and there is a place for all of us to contribute to creating daily stability. It's not just a matter of making better choices that will support stability. The correlation can be that community may have some work to do or help to build resources that will eliminate barriers. Employers all around the country are finding ways to help their employees build resources and stabilize their lives. It's not just about asking employees to make the change themselves. However, like I mentioned, my presentation focuses mainly on the individual lens today and how I had to use some of these factors in order to be successful in the workplace. So this takes me back to my story of employment in Puerto Rico at the health center and my experience with the cliff effect. So what is the cliff effect? It's also known as the benefits cliff, and simply put, it's when your earned income goes up, your subsidies or government benefits go down. In theory, that sounds like common sense. However, the impact is that the benefits or value of the benefits decrease at a higher monetary rate than the earned income is making up for, often leaving individuals or families struggling more than they were before employment. And these benefits are often in the form of childcare, housing, and healthcare, making it difficult to stabilize employment. This is often why employees pass up extra hours at work or promotions and raises. This is also one reason for employees, So after 4 years of working at the health center, I decided to resign from my position because I wasn't any further along financially. I had lived in subsidized housing, and I was the only individual that was paying full rent for my unit. I was the only person in the projects in Puerto Rico that was buying food with cash. I was the only one paying for lunch at my children's lunch at school. Everything about my quality of life had all of a sudden become unbalanced. In fact, for the first time in my adult life, I was actually in debt because I continually had to borrow in order to keep up with some of my bills. So financially, the impact that it had on me financially made me choose a very personal decision to quit that job. I moved to Iowa. I moved to Iowa looking for security. And here I found the Getting Ahead class. And it was then that I learned about the implications of the cliff effect. While I had experienced it, I had no idea what was happening to me. As I was going through the process, I thought that I should be better off. I thought that I should be making more money. I thought that I would be getting ahead. But I didn't understand some of the systemic implications, like losing my medical benefits, losing my child care subsidies, and how the dollar amount wouldn't balance out in the long run. After taking Getting Ahead and getting back into the workforce for a second time and learning about the implications of the cliff effect, this time I was better prepared for the experience. When I went back into the workforce, I had contingency plans in place that would help me navigate that cliff. I knew what dollar amount I had to be earning in order for the cliff not to hit me as hard. I knew what dollar amount would put me in the cliff, so I knew what I knew when I can accept a promotion or when I couldn't accept a promotion. And all of that contributed to building longer term stability in my situation. Another barrier or benefit to employment is not knowing or knowing the hidden rules and expectations of any given social setting. Hidden rules are some of those norms or behaviors exhibited by a group. We encounter hidden rules in a variety of social settings, including the workplace. These are not to be confused by the policy and procedures on the job or the employee handbook, but those same rules and regulations can often be misunderstood based on the hidden rules that an employee brings with them. For example, wearing business professional attire can be loosely interpreted depending on the environment an employee has had experiences with. Like resources, hidden rules are often informed and passed on from the environments in which they come from. An example of hidden rule in daily instability for money is that it is often spent immediately because they hardly ever have enough of it. And so as soon as it comes, it goes. Money is often shared with family and friends. Remember, because family and friends are the resources that the individuals have to solve problems many times. Whereas in stability and in long-term stability, money is viewed as something to be conserved and saved and invested. Spending is considered a liability, and discussing finances is often taboo. In instability, personality is based on a person's character, whether or not they are liked, the sense of humor that they use, and the sense of humor that they use can often be crass. But when it comes to personality instability, while we each have our own unique personalities, so most of the times we're taught to check our personalities or our big personalities at the door, especially at the workplace, so that we can create more welcoming and open environments. So I want you to take a minute and think about some of the hidden rules. And actually, if you want to add a few to the chat box, that would be great. And think about some of the hidden rules at your place of work. Now, at your place of work, some of the hidden rules are going to be things like casual Friday, right? And you're allowed to wear jeans on a Friday, and the new hire didn't quite get the memo, and the new hire shows up on Friday in business professional attire and is the only one wearing business professional clothing, and everyone else is in jeans. So what examples at your place of work might there be about hidden rules? We have tables in the break room. I love the parking spots in the parking lot and especially the ones that don't have titles to them, right? But someone has been working at that place of work for quite a while, and they show up at the same time similarly and park in the same spot. And one day, someone else pulls into their spot, right? Almost wish you can have a ticket, have tickets to hand out to people who park in parking spots. What other examples? Ooh, playing music at the desk or not? Yes, yes. And then kindly telling people that they need to get a headset. Punctuality does vary among staff. And punctuality is one of those things where, we do have workplace expectations of what time we're supposed to arrive. And depending on the business, how that's enforced can be different. But punctuality can even be, viewed in a workplace that if you're not there 5, 10, 15 minutes early, then you're late. Any other examples of hidden rules at the workplace? How about coffee? Does anybody have shared coffee machines where if you drink the last cup of coffee, you have to fill the pot, and if you don't fill the pot, everyone is kind of antsy and trying to find the culprit? Yes, workplace celebrations. In my previous place of work, there were a lot of potlucks. And originally coming from the East Coast, I had no idea what potlucks were. And to be quite honest, just never ended up being a value of mine. Oh, wow. Refrigerator and the food being fair game. Thank you. Yes, yes. Different expectations for different levels of positions. Thank you. So you see that hidden rules are one of those things that when you are a part of that environment, you can learn them, you can catch on. Someone can help you understand them. But it's really important to teach new employees and to help them understand what some of the social norms and cues are within an environment so that it can feel like a welcoming place. Hidden rules, especially in the workforce, we're in a time right now where diversity and inclusion in the workplace is key. And maintaining employees, if you are a business that traditionally hires males, and trying to become more open and inclusive to females, it's important to be able to help females understand what some of those normalized hidden rules are in the workplace so that they don't feel put out, so that they don't feel like they're not a part of the team. And that's true for economic class as well. So what can you do in the workplace to get this concept of hidden rules, or bring these hidden rules to light so that they're not so hidden? Of course, direct teaching, right, is an option. And what I would like to add to this is that I don't know about you, but I often don't take advice from people I don't trust, people that I don't have a relationship with, or people that I don't like. And so one of the best ways to direct teach anything, for a matter of fact, is to be able to build a relationship of mutual respect with the person that you're trying to pass this information down. Because hidden rules, when we teach people hidden rules, often we're trying to inform them of the normalized way this group or this society functions so that the individual can be successful. But if the hidden rule doesn't make sense to the individual, a lot of the times they will reject that information as a way of you trying to change me, or the system is trying to change me. And so building relationship is going to be key when learning hidden rules. When I was going through Getting Ahead, the reason that learning this concept of hidden rules was so important to me was because I learned to distinguish the difference between following two different sets of rules, understanding that how I function, how I speak, how I operate at home or in my home environment, I can still be that person. I can still operate that way, and that's fine. But that coming into the workforce, I can operate under a different set of rules and be successful in that workplace. So making the case for change that I can operate under two different normalized expectations in each environment didn't make me any less fake or any less true to myself. In fact, it helped me play the game better. Um, what else? So I'm going to pause for a moment. Any questions of anything that I have shared up until this moment? And if you do, you can please add that into the chat. So employees in poverty or employees that are experiencing daily instability, we realize that there are definitely a lot of individual barriers. There are barriers that they bring to the table based on how they function, how they operate, the environment that they live in, whether or not they have access to resources. However, if we only view our diverse coworkers who are experiencing struggles in their life as a liability and not an asset, then we're hindering the opportunity to expand and diversify our workplace even further. Because individuals from instability also bring with them a lot of beneficial qualities. And if we treat those employees with mutual respect, in turn, we'll see employees who have many of these qualities and that they can actually enhance performance that we're looking for. So think about your coworkers or think about your customers or individuals that you know that experience daily instability, and think of some of the qualities that those individuals bring to the table. And how might you be able to help those individuals apply those qualities to their job performance? Before I got introduced to this work, I did not know how to transfer my natural innate survival skills into the workplace. I had no idea that I was a good communicator. I just thought I liked to talk a lot. I had no idea that my comfort with communication would be able to be transferred to public speaking opportunities. I had no idea that my ability to code switch would actually make me more relatable. And when I realized and learned how to transfer some of those qualities and apply them into workplace settings, well, guess what? It beefed up my resume. So when an employee views their skill sets as an added value to the company, then they begin to feel like they're a part of the team and that their employment becomes a welcoming space that feeds into the value of their relationships. We're creating stability for the employee and the employer. So like I said, I've learned how to transfer some of those skills and apply them to workplace outcomes. And I've learned how to seek out positions that allow me to apply some of my more natural qualities while I learn how to enhance my skill sets for the job on hand. We often hear language like low-skilled employees. And that kind of irks me, because if employers are viewing employees as low skilled and using language like low skilled, then the employee is also taking on that message, and then the employee starts to view themselves as a low skilled employee. So it's kind of a negative connotation. I know what they're implying, but I think entry level positions are a little bit more level on that playing field, because I think most of the time employers are willing to train the employee on hand how to do the job. So to assume that an employee is low skilled often negates some of these qualities that they already have. Building language at work, again, one of the other most important things about this information, how it applied to me and how we use it when talking to employers, is exactly that. building language at work, we find that communication ends up being one of the hardest or one of the biggest barriers and struggles when employing individuals that are coming from instability, especially when when they are coming from generational instability. So we know that generational poverty and situational poverty aren't exactly the same thing. An individual that is experiencing situational poverty often has a background of education, maybe they have a supportive family structure. The resources that they have or have had might look a little bit differently than the resources from a person who's experienced generational poverty. In my home, my mother was a stay-at-home mom, and so learning about the workforce and learning about continuing my education, it wasn't something that was taught at home. So when I pursued those ventures, all of those systems were completely new for me, and because they were new, they were kind of difficult to navigate. Whoops, went too far. So talking about helping people understand how they use language, helping people understand that language also has an implication on how they view time, whether or not an individual needs to process information concretely, or whether or not they have the ability to think into the future and be creative and look at things from an abstract point of view. The other important thing about language and working with people that are coming from instability is their ability to be attuned to nonverbal communication. Oftentimes, people in poverty are reading you and making decisions about whether or not they can trust you based on your nonverbal communication. When we discuss language, we tend to only talk about formal and casual register. So formal register is the language that you learn in school, right? It has complete sentences, proper sentence syntax. It's the language that books are written in. It's the language that we read and write in most of the time, versus casual register. And like I mentioned earlier, having been grown up in Brooklyn, New York, and in the projects, Ebonics was my language of choice. It was what I heard all around me, a combination of slang, a combination of speaking with my hands. I'm very still right now for this presentation. I'm not normally like that. When I give live presentations, I stand up, I walk around the crowd, I'm talking with my hands a lot, I'm very colorful. I tend to get lost in the conversation. My mind will veer and I'll jump into another story. I use language to build relationships. I use language to be able to highlight my character and my personality. So, but that doesn't always work in the formal register setting or where formal register is expected. And so if formal register is expected at the workplace, and you might encounter people who tell really long, drawn out stories and never get to the point. Or maybe they use slang as they're communicating and you don't quite understand what they're trying to say. Or they curse. Like I said, I'm from Brooklyn. And so using swear words is just a part of my vocabulary. But as a presenter, I realized that if I'm dropping the F-bomb every other word, I've lost my audience, 5 minutes into the presentation. And so learning how to curb that language has become important and essential in my growth. Again, language can be taught, and helping people understand how to code switch and why code switching could be valuable to them creates stability for everyone around. So like hidden rules, people bring with them to work the language and word choices, the grammar and communication styles that were influenced by their environment. And the interesting thing is that of US adults, more than 16 years of age, 14% read at or below a 5th grade reading level. 29% read at an 8th grade level, and 43% live in poverty. So when employees have low literacy levels, the result ends up being a lack of performance on the job. And I just don't believe that that's because of their ability, solely because of their ability to communicate. The thing about language is that we often view people or judge people for their intelligence based on how they communicate and based on their language skills. But language has very little to do with IQ, little to nothing to do with actual IQ, right? Language is a form of communication, and language can be learned. So what are some of the things we can do in the workplace to teach or to enhance a coworker's ability to communicate? So again, helping employees understand that while using slang and cursing is fine and acceptable on their breaks, at their place of work, that the ability to code switch is going to get them further and help them retain their position longer. The other thing about language is sometimes pairing up. So if someone has a lower literacy rate, then things like the employee manual, in my previous employment, we had an administrative policy, and it was a book. And even when I can find the article that I was looking for, the policy that I was looking for, I would have to read that 5 and 10 times just to feel like I was understanding pieces of it. Honestly, that administrative policies, OSHA policies, they're not made for the employee. They're made for lawyers. And so to expect our employees that are coming with lower proficiency in their literacy rates to understand some of those things could be a challenge. So anything that we can do to innovate how we are communicating information, and we might have to give out those handbooks and those OSHA policies and so forth, but do we have the opportunity to translate them? Do we have the opportunity to incorporate more visual aids, stories? Can we incorporate examples? One of the biggest things in getting ahead was that every time we would talk about one of these bridges constructs, we had to pair it with examples of things that other getting ahead participants have experienced in their lives, because otherwise these new concepts are so abstract that they don't make sense. I think about when I was purchasing my home. I would have conversations with homeowners, and they would use terms that I had no idea what it was. I've owned my home for the past 4 years now, and things break down. And when things break down, I'm like a deer in headlights. I have no idea what to do about it. And when I call an expert to have it repaired and they explain to me what was wrong with it and what I can do better, same. I have no idea unless I am visually there watching them and they're explaining things to me. A lot of that information gets lost in translation. So to end the presentation, there are definitely a lot of strategies that employers can take, or if you are working with coworkers who you know are struggling in daily instability, and you can recognize some of the factors that they're bringing to the table are making it difficult for them to retain their employment or to feel welcome and included in their place of employment. Like I said, building relationship is #1 factor to be able to transfer information, to be able to share information. Obviously, there's always going to be rules and regs that we have to give out, and there's no flexing. We can't compromise it. This is the way it goes. This is what you need to do. But often those things are important for executing the job on hand. I think that with instability, it's often the outside stuff that they're bringing in that make it difficult for inclusion or for the individuals to feel like they're a part of a team. In turn, that that value or the fact that they feel excluded, what it does is it often prioritizes the factors that they have outside of work and prohibits them from concentrating on what they have going on inside of work. I had a conversation yesterday with a group of community members about the same topic, and one of the things that we brought to light was that these entry-level positions or these low-skilled jobs, employers often view those positions as disposable, or those positions are often suffer from a lot of turnover. And so the notion is that if the employee has to show up and the employee has to follow everything by the rule book, and they have to fit into that normalized setting and to that culture of the workplace. But if they don't, we'll just get someone else. One of the challenges of that mentality, especially with the economy and the employment rate being as low as it is right now in the country, is that employees also view employers as disposable. And I understand that this is kind of controversial, but I think about the food service industry. Think about fast food jobs. If an employee is working fast food and they're having some struggles with transportation or childcare or health issues, whatever it is that is preventing them from doing the best that they can, whether that be showing up or whether that be communicating with their coworkers or whether that be focusing on the task on hand. If their external barriers are so great that they're causing internal pains for the business, then chances are that employee is going to view this position as interchangeable as well. If I get fired or if I quit, that's fine because I can go across the street and get a job at the other fast food place. And so when we are working with those entry-level workers, I believe that one of the reasons we see a lot of turnover is because they view a job as just a job. But if we start practicing business and creating workplace culture that helps those individuals feel valued, seen, heard, cared for, if they feel like they're a part of a team, if they feel like their job is valuable and important, and if they're not doing their best, then they're jamming up their other coworkers. A lot of the times they'll think twice about how to solve those problems and what they're putting in place of what they're prioritizing, making employment just as important as some of the factors that are going on in their life. Because we realize that we cannot change all of the external factors, whether somebody has transportation or not, isn't always workable or isn't always something that the employer can solve. But what I do encourage employers to do is to examine, and this says examine your client's life cycle. I think we can observe our client's life cycle. I think we can examine how we practice business. So how do you practice business? That from everything from your application process to your interview process to onboarding to once the employee is a part of the team. Does the employee know how to get help and get support where needed? Are the tiers and hierarchy in your institution making it so difficult where entry-level employees don't feel like they're a bigger part of the puzzle? So to end this, some of the strategies for helping employees create more stability in their lives is the Getting Ahead class. Getting Ahead will help an individual examine their own struggles. Um, I like to call it personal development. Had I not gone through Getting Ahead 12 years ago, I don't think I would have had the mindset and the knowledge and information of how other systems operate, and how when I bring my big personality into those systems, there's clash. And when I experienced that prior to Getting Ahead, I viewed it personally. Now I realize that it's just two different expectations or two different norms or set of rules. And now I have the opportunity to either justify why I'm going to play by a different norm or set of rules. I can choose when I'm going to fold into that normalized setting, and I can choose when I'm just not going to. But when I choose I'm not going to, I take that responsibility. I have chosen to not be a part of this system, to not be a part of this institution. It really helps to play down the victim mentality as well. So if your community does not offer Getting Ahead, what can you do? Who can you partner with in your community that this may become available? Employees that have the opportunity to examine themselves, examine their economic status, examine where they've come from, and how where they've come from may be barriers to where they want to go. Getting Ahead creates this positive mentality where those barriers don't always have to be hindrances, a hindrance, and what you can do to overcome some of those barriers. The other most important thing in my own personal journey was surrounding myself with enough mentors and coaches. Because every time I went through something new, something different, a system that was not normalized for me, um, it was like I was like a blank book. I had no idea where to go, what to do, and how to solve those problems. So the concept of an employee resource network allows for some coaching throughout the process as well. I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to open it up for some questions for the last 10 minutes. So if you do have a question, please add that into your chat box.
Thank you, Ermina, for that really nice overview of how this looks for an employee from daily instability entering into the workforce, and some of the challenges between an employer and an employee because of economic class. So what questions does anybody have for Ermina? Please put that into the chat. Workplace stability is created for employers and business. It takes the core constructs out of, bridges out of poverty, and it reframes that for the driving force of business, which is retention, productivity, competition, becoming an employer of choice, safety, technology, and it really uses those driving forces to talk about the environments of economic class. And of course, getting ahead in the workplace has been rewritten by Phil Duvall for the workplace. Some of the language has been changed in that regard. Any questions? Looks like Ermina has done a great job of explaining it. If you don't have any questions, we'll begin wrapping up. We have the Addressing the Challenges of Poverty conference in September in Indianapolis, and there are sessions, breakout sessions like this, so that you can learn more, go back into your business. There's one question for you. Do you see that?
I do. And I think that's the $100,000 question, right? What do you think works best for getting businesses interested in addressing these issues? I was having a conversation yesterday with a coalition of businesses and individuals who are interested in learning more about workplace stability, and are going to attend a full day training that I have at the end of the month. Here in Iowa, and they were asking that same very question. You know, I know that there are employers that could benefit from this, so what do I do to get them interested? And, you know, I think one of the biggest challenges for employers is that they're running a business and they have a bottom line to meet. And the employers are not in the business of social service. But unfortunately, with today's economy and even our changing generation, you know, the demographic that's coming into the workplace tends to value things and function a lot more under the lens of instability than we did, you know, in generations past. And so I think I think for a business to be interested in addressing these issues, that business has to suffer enough instability in their business to make them realize that it's time to innovate. It's time to assess and to analyze how we are conducting business. And I don't mean business as far as the product that is being put out for whomever the customer or consumer is, right? But businesses often don't view their entry-level employees as their number one asset to the business. And if a business is not treating employees, those entry-level employees, as an asset and investing in their human capital, then that is going to impact their external productivity, their external sales, how their customer service is handled. So I think that retention, if a business is not experiencing business pains financially and retention issues, and it's not impacting the quality of their bottom line, then oftentimes they're disinterested or just expect the community to create innovative solutions to solve problems and bring them the perfect employee. But I think that we've come to a point where businesses have to recognize that it is also their responsibility to create better working conditions for people. Any other questions?
It's a really good question, Beth. Thank you. All right, if there are no other questions, then we're going to end this webinar. It will be included in the April newsletter and online under the webinar page is a recording of it. So thank you for your time, and we'll see you back in 2 weeks for the next webinar. Have a good day. Bye-bye. Thanks, Ermina. Nicely done.
Thank you.